Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Game On, exclusive to 𝐊𝐴 TV. I'm James Preston, and in this episode, NRL Touch Football has secured a big deal with broadcaster Kayo Sports to elevate the game to new heights. Anastasia Palaszczuk is in hot water over her sporting world allegiances, and we'll also chat football with Adam Santarossa and tennis with Brett Phillips respectively. Let's begin with the world of cricket, and Australia's historic test against Afghanistan in November is in massive doubt, with the International Cricket Council set to review the status of the Middle Eastern nation following the Taliban's takeover. Under the new regime, women will not be allowed to play cricket because it's not deemed a priority. Cricket Australia has taken a similar stance, warning that the one-off test in Hobart will not go ahead if the Taliban does not change their position against women playing sport. The Taliban's Deputy Cultural Commissioner, Ahmadullah Wasik, stated, part of the reason women will not be permitted to play cricket in the country is that we are living in the media era of a time where there will be photos and videos and then people will watch it. Islam and the Islamic Emirate do not allow women to play cricket or play the kind of sports where they get exposed. Turning our attention to rugby league, and NRL CEO Andrew Abdo has announced that NRLW players could be set for a pay rise. Abdo and the NRL has attracted criticism of late due to the cancellation of the women's rugby league season, despite doing all in its power to continue the men's competition. In response, Abdo has set out a plan for a bumper schedule in 2022 with a pay packet to match. 2022 will feature two NRLW campaigns, the first of which will take place early next year, and in the 11-month schedule, there will also be the State of Origin fixture included, along with the World Cup and state competitions. This could result in women playing upwards of 30 matches next year. In the NRL itself, despite hoping to be based in New Zealand for the 2022 campaign, the Warriors have confirmed they will use Redcliffe in Queensland as their home base for next year's competition. The Warriors will, however, look to play 6 of their matches at home in Auckland, New Zealand next year. And just before we talk all things football with Adam Santarossa, let's quickly touch on the latest sporting adventure from Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. Now, it's important that we gain some context in this matter. For the uninitiated, Palaszczuk has provided some of the most draconian lockdown and COVID-related laws in the country. That includes mandating vaccines for truckers looking to enter the state, preventing families from returning home to the state, whilst providing special exemptions for the families of NRL players, and of course creating a literal physical barrier at the border, which resulted in insane scenes of people from nearby towns south of the border on Father's Day, with no COVID cases for that matter, having to travel to the border simply to try and see family. That's the standard that she has set. On September 4, last Saturday, Palaszczuk hosted the Premier's Welcome Home dinner for all Queensland-based Olympic athletes that had competed in Tokyo. Now, the one thing you might have noticed from these photos is the lack of masks. Now, the state might be now out of lockdown, but on August 27, a release from Queensland Health stated the following. From 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 27th of August until 4 p.m. Friday the 10th of September, aka today, increased face mask restrictions continue to apply to the 11 local government areas in southeast Queensland. These local government areas are declared impacted areas and include the following LGAs: City of Brisbane, Moreton Bay Regional Council, along with 9 other LGAs. Now, the Premier's dinner occurred at the Royal International Convention Centre in Bowen Hills, which, you guessed it, is a suburb inside of the Brisbane LGA. So what are the rules around masks for these areas? According to the very same Queensland Health release on August 27, and I quote, "You must wear a face mask at all times when you are indoors, including workplaces, unless you can stay 1.5 metres away from others, only in your workplace, or you're at your residence and there is no one else there except people that you live with, or you're eating or drinking, or simply it's unsafe to wear a mask." Again, according to the government she leads, if you don't comply, you may be given an on-the-spot fine of $1,378 for individuals, a court-imposed penalty of up to $13,785, or 6 months imprisonment. Let me make this very clear. I have no issue with celebrating our fantastic Olympians. They deserve every single plaudit this country has to offer. I do take exception to premiers who believe the rule does not apply to them. There is, after all, one rule for her and the ruling elites, and one rule for you. All right, let's now catch up on the beautiful game with football journalist and commentator Adam Santarossa. Adam Santarossa, thanks for joining Game On.
Good to be here, James.
Well, mate, let's start with a pretty bizarre footballing story. An international between two of the world heavyweights in Argentina and Brazil was abandoned. What happened?
Yeah, this was truly a bizarre situation. 5 minutes into a game that really the world is watching. Anytime Brazil and Argentina come together, plenty tune in. And we only got 5 minutes before the health officials stormed the pitch and removed 4 players from the side, and due to COVID reasons. It's truly become a debacle, which FIFA are now looking into in terms of levelling some punishments, and there's a lot of ongoing things relating to COVID and different players travelling for international duty at the moment. So quite baffling. I mean, the big question to be asked, and the one everyone is asking, is why did it take 5 minutes into the game before that happened? Team sheets are put in an hour before the game. Players are in the country 24 hours before the game. So plenty of time to sort it out. Football at times surprises, and there's not much more surprising than that one.
And what was the issue? Was it players testing positive for COVID or not quarantining, or what exactly was the cause of concern for health officials?
Yeah, so the UK is flagged as a red zone for Brazil. So there were 4 Argentinian players coming in from England. So they were flying in from a red zone. They were meant to quarantine, and there was some talk that, like a lot of sporting bodies have had here in Australia, but also around the world, there wasn't, they had permission to avoid quarantine because they were essentially in a bubble, given their Premier League clubs and everything else going on. But not good enough for the Brazilian health officials, so they pulled those 4 Argentinian players off the field 5 minutes in, and we obviously didn't get a game. So, and this is, it's actually surprising it's taken this long for an issue to flare up like this. I mean, it's surprising that given the Euros we just saw, and there was a lot of travel around Europe for the Euros, there wasn't one central hosting country like we normally see. So it's surprising it's taken this long, but it was going to happen eventually, and it's been pretty embarrassing for both countries involved, but I guess FIFA at a wider level.
Well, tying into that, of course, there are more dramas for Brazil in football. The Brazilian FA is attempting to block a number of EPL players from playing in matches. Is this again due to the same sort of health concerns?
Yeah, this is a different issue, but it's all sort of aligned into the one conversation. So several EPL clubs actually banned or blocked their players from recognising their international call-ups. So Cavani from Manchester United, Fred was another one from Brazil, given the reason that they would travel to South America, and then upon return they would have to do 10 days of quarantine before they could link with their Premier League club. These Premier League teams obviously pay these stars hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, so they want some say into having them available. But conversely, the international call-ups, the FIFA rules state that if you are called up by your national team and it is blocked by the club, or you don't then arrive for whatever reason, you are then subsequently blocked for a 5 to 10 day period where that international break would have been with your club. So they then can't play for Manchester United this round, for example. So that's the rule, and it's always been like that to prevent clubs from strong-arming countries in terms of releasing their players for friendlies or qualifiers, and it's something Australia has had to deal with in the past, getting their players away from Europe, given the long distance. A lot of clubs would block their players, so that's why the rule's there, and it's obviously taken a bit more weight given COVID. And this is the situation we're in, where players are flying are considered red zones. Others don't have quite as stringent COVID regulations, and then conversely, coming back the other way, when they return, some nations have to quarantine, some don't. We're seeing games in the Middle East at the moment involving the Socceroos, where there's none of those red zones or anything like that in place. So it's very different for different confederations and players all around the world, and it's becoming a bit of a mess rather quickly.
There's not just the mess in terms of the health officials and releasing players. FIFA also into a bit of a mess themselves at the moment, looking to change the schedule for when World Cups are occurring from 4 years to every 2 potentially. Now, Adam, first and foremost, why are they doing it? Do you think it's just a money grab? And also, could it have dire implications for world football?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, FIFA do love the odd decision that comes out of left field, and this is certainly one of those. And I personally don't think it's got a lot of weight. I mean, the appeal for them is to sort of restructure the international game. There's a lot of friendlies that go on. There's a lot of competitions that have sprung up. Obviously, the UEFA Nations League, which is sort of to try and give a bit more weight to these friendlies that go on. And there's a tie-in with the Euro qualifiers in that. And FIFA are trying to hold a bit more control over that calendar. Obviously, the Euros is a great money spinner for UEFA, and conversely, Copa America as well for CONMEBOL. So FIFA want to try and, obviously, the World Cup is a license to print money. Its ratings is phenomenal. It makes a lot of cash for everyone involved, namely FIFA. And look, if you can have two of those every 4 years, then you're doubling your money. So that's essentially, it's hard to not see that as being the reason. We don't want to be too harsh on old FIFA, but I cannot see this happening. As I said, UEFA make a lot of money from the Euros, so too South America from the Copa America, the Gold Cup with CONCACAF, the Asian Cup as well. They make massive money through ratings, and the participating nations obviously get a slice of that. So I can't see this changing. And the biggest factor against this are the clubs, because that's going to mean more time away from clubs. How the qualifiers, it's already hard enough given the current environment and everything we just spoke about. To get these qualifiers done for a World Cup every 4 years, how is that going to happen if you have one every 2 years? I don't think it can happen, and even more so. I mean, we're still reeling with the decision for 2026 to have 48 teams in the World Cup as opposed to 32. So they're already making changes, which to me are really ruining what makes the World Cup so good. I don't agree at all with the 48 teams. So to do it every 2 years, your best product that it's hard to ruin, you just leave the World Cup alone and it does its work. This idea may exactly do that. So not a good idea in my books.
Adam, well said. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That is the golden rule. Once again, thank you so much for joining the show this week.
Anytime.
Always great to get Adam's insight, and it truly is quite a strange time for world football. Time now for a very short break on Game On. We'll catch up with NRL Touch Football CEO Jamie O'Connor to talk about the sport and a new deal for its promotion next. Has your week hit you for six? Barely had time to breathe, let alone throw a flick pass? Well, don't worry, 𝐊𝐴 has all your sporting action covered. Each episode, I'll bring you the biggest sports news of the week. Exclusive interviews with athletes, sports commentators and journalists. Plus, we'll also look at the finances off the field for new broadcast deals,
download for you and you can play it out. This is all
sports commercial partnerships and more with sports business. So for a sports show that tackles all the big issues, ball and all.
I don't know.
Yeah, that'll work.
Oh, no.
Join me, James Preston, for Game On every Friday, exclusive to 𝐊𝐴 TV.
You can download it.
This is open?
Yeah. Oh, AirDrop, that's right.
Thanks for tuning in to 𝐊𝐴 TV. I'm James Preston, and this is Game On, your one-stop shop for all things sport. Touch football has been growing at a rapid rate in the country for the past few years, and it's now set to go into overdrive with a new deal between Touch Football and sports broadcaster Kayo Sports that will see over 100 hours of touch footy streamed exclusively, live and free on the platform annually. To get the inside word on the deal and to look at NRL Touch Football more broadly, I caught up with the CEO, Jamie O'Connor. Jamie O'Connor, thanks for joining Game On.
Pleasure, James. Yeah, thanks for having us on, mate. Appreciate it.
Now, Jamie, touch football has been going from strength to strength over the past few years, and within the past week, there's been an incredibly exciting announcement that will help push the sport to new heights. Tell us a bit about the deal that NRL Touch Football has signed off with Kayo Sports.
Really, it's a real marquee one for us, I think, James. It just continues to sort of show our progression over the last. Certainly over the last 3 years, commercially, we've become a lot more savvy, and a real focus around the commercial component. A major part of what we need to do is to continue to build the profile of our sport, and not just us, but most sports talk about, you can't be what you can't see, and we talk about that a lot internally, and we're trying to really put a spotlight on our sport and show the average person that sits at home and wants to consume sport as a spectator sport of what touch football, particularly at the elite end, looks like. It's particularly early on, we sort of had some feedback around our sport that I don't want to be watching that. But what we need to shift people's mindset is it's not what what we're broadcasting is not what you go and play on the weekend or what you play through the week on a Monday or Tuesday night or whatever it might be in your local community. The elite end of the sport is something that's really fast, it's really athletic, highly skilled. The shift to KO is trying to introduce a new audience to our sport, which we think will be critical in growing our participation base, which at the end of the day is our main focus. We try and drive as many people to come and enjoy our sport as we possibly can. And this is just one of the methods that we'll employ to do that.
We have mentioned there that the last few years you've had this ongoing partnership to give a bit more visibility to the game. And obviously part of that would be looking to increase and extend the product. Are there value adding elements that you're looking at moving forward with this KO deal?
Yeah, look, there is, and we'll keep sort of building out on the agreement. KO have been fantastic for us so far in all of the discussions. We keep throwing different types of concepts up as far as content that we can produce. I think in a broader NRL strategy, and obviously we've got a really close alignment and great partnership with NRL. What this partnership does is that we're a predominantly summer sport, and most of our events sit in that summer space between October and March, and April, where I guess our Trans-Tasman international window sits. But there's a really broad sort of 12-month year-round offering. If you're you're NRL or rugby league aligned and you want to watch that type of content, we sort of build out a calendar right across the period of 12 months. And no matter what sort of pieces of content we've thrown up as conceptually as areas that we'd like to continue to explore, KO have been terrific. So I think it's a case of you'll see national youth championships, pandemic pending, but we're really confident that we'll be able to get a national youth champs underway later this month, early October. And that'll be the first sort of dip our toe in the water of our partnership with KO, and we'll continue to build on that. But certainly as far as value add around content goes, we're looking forward to what we can do together over the course of our partnership.
Now, we've been talking a bit there about the growth of the sport itself. Obviously, what's been going on over the past 18 months would have hampered that somewhat, just because it's interrupted so many different industries, so many different sporting competitions. How has touch football been navigating the pandemic over the past 18 months?
Look, it's been challenging. I think, right from the get-go, we set a fairly strong tone around leadership, both, at TFA, New South Wales Touch Football, and Queensland Touch Football. At a leadership and board level, we're really strong on the fact that we're going to be proactively reactive. And what we sort of talk about that is that we didn't want to jump the gun and try and preempt what government might do. We didn't want to jump the gun and try and preempt what the virus might do, and how long we're going to be closed down for, and whether or not we'd be back up next month, or whether we'd be down for a year. So we kept a really close eye on obviously what departments that we're doing, particularly obviously around health and borders reopening. And we've got eight states and territories around Australia, and then a federal national cabinet that sort of all each have intricate differences in the way that they'll reopen. And being a national sport, it makes it really challenging for us to keep a handle on who's open and what you can and can't do around different regions. But look, we've been quite fortunate, I guess, when you compare to most sports. The upcoming summer, particularly in New South Wales, is going to be our testing material. It's going to be really challenging for us in understanding, when community sport can come back, and, governments released, New South Wales governments, released some restrictions or announced a roadmap out of restrictions commencing sort of what we expect around the middle of October, and where community sports sits in that is still a little bit up in the air. And again, it goes to that we'll react once we have all of the information in front of us. But, looking forward to getting to, high vaccination rates, moving, our way through, the impact of COVID, and then a period where we sort of start to learn to live with COVID and what we can start to do. And then, those major strategies sort of get back on the table for us.
We mentioned vaccination rates there, Jamie. Now that is one interesting thing that's going to be obviously encompassing pretty much every part of society, and touch football is not going to be immune to that. Will players have to be vaccinated to compete? And if that's the case, what levels of competition will we be looking at for not so much mandatory vaccinations, but safely being able to compete with the tournaments you're running? And for that matter, given the ongoing concerns around COVID, do you have any pathways in mind for international tournaments, or is that once again a case of proactively reacting?
I think on both counts, when you talk, domestic and international touch, I think it'll be a case of wait and see. Government hasn't come out and given us any great direction on that. Not that we're expecting that to have been the case yet, but we'll be interested to watch this space around what happens certainly with community sport, right? When you start talking about community sport. But again, we'll follow government advice. So if government advice is that, restrictions are eased and we can go back to community sport, but it's only for those who are fully vaccinated, then we'll toe that line absolutely and make sure that our sport can get back to as near as full strength as we can in the short term. And if the model from government is, once we reach, 80% seems to be the number that everybody's talking about. Once we reach that 80% double dose vaccination across the community, if some of the broader restrictions start to reduce and there's not the requirement for vaccinated and unvaccinated people to be able to play or not, then again, we'll follow that. We'll follow that advice. So a really simple answer is if government says, you need to do this and you need to comply, then we'll comply. If there's no requirement to comply and we feel that in our interest and in the health and safety of our membership, that it is okay for us to return to sport with a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated people participating, then of course that's the road that we would be looking to take.
And just on the international scene as well, obviously that's another thing that you can't have complete control over. You're very much reliant on what the government says. But are you looking forward, I suppose? Are you hopeful that you can actually get back to like a Trans-Tasman series, for example? Yeah,
for sure. We're really confident with that. To be fair, we've had a couple of false starts. So we thought that January of 22, we would have been able to travel to Christchurch for the first series since 2019 or 2020 for both the youth and masters Trans-Tasman in January 22. The uncertainty around where we're at the moment, and obviously the mass numbers that we're seeing in New South Wales and now Victoria sort of starting to creep up, that put that put significant doubt across that. I don't think that, I think January would have been too soon. We've moved that back to the middle of April, so we'll have back-to-back youth and masters Trans-Tasmans in Christchurch, and then the following week New Zealand will come here for our Opens Trans-Tasman in Newcastle, which we're really excited about. And I think April, I'm really confident that by the time we get to April that that Trans-Tasman bubble's back open and we're ready to go.
Yeah, well, look, we'll keep our fingers crossed for April. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us. Just before I let you go, if we do want more information about NRL Touch Football, how can we find it?
Follow our socials. I think we do a really good. Our comms team do a really good job around our socials. So we're really active on Instagram and Facebook particularly. And then just go to our website, touchfootball.com.au, and you'll find all of the information about our sport that you could possibly want.
Brilliant. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for joining Game On.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, very exciting times for touch football fans. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the sport continues to grow and that the Trans-Tasman series can go ahead. All right, after the break, we wrap things up with Brett Phillips and a quick look at the finances off the field with Sports Business. Brett Phillips, thanks for joining Game On.
Thank you, James.
Now, look, we are into the pointy end of the US Open, and despite a first set hiccup in the quarterfinal, Novak Djokovic is through to the semis against Zverev. How does he look for this one?
Well, I was simply in awe today. I mean, you've got to go on radio and talk, and I was speechless. So that wasn't a great combination. But, look, Novak, he's in a habit of dropping a set. It's almost like the conspiracy theorists think he's going out there and doing it deliberately just to give his opponent a little bit of a look in and some hope. But the pattern is he drops a set and then he just goes on a tear. I mean, it's an absolute rout after that. He just goes into Zen mode. It's like, how do you stop this guy? I mean, he's returning bullets at your feet up the middle of the court. He's serving big. He just doesn't miss. And Berrettini's like, how do I beat this guy? I can't beat him at the French, took a set off him. Can't beat him at Wimbledon, took a set off him. Took a set off him here. I mean, his biggest go-to is his serve. So I can maybe serve my way out, but then Djokovic just comes up with unbelievable returns. I mean, he's the best returner in probably the history of the game. So Berrettini can hit a spot up the tee or out wide, and because of his athleticism and his flexibility, he can just get a racket either side and shoot it back up the middle, and you're on the back foot. So Novak's, look, he's in sublime form. I mean, he gets to this stage of a major and he doesn't get beaten. So Sasha Zverev, the big German, he's next. He's going to have a crack. He's in the best of form. He's won 16 matches in a row. He's beaten Djokovic, a set and a breakdown in Tokyo. That's best of 3. Ran him to a competitive match in the quarterfinals of the Australian Open this year, where he was terrific. So this is the big test. Can he step up? Best of 5 and beat Djokovic? It would be the biggest tennis story of the year. I can't see it happening, but either way, it's going to be a big story.
With that in mind, does he then go on to take out the whole thing, Novak?
Yeah, well, Medvedev, I think, accounts for Felix Auger-Aliassime in the other semi. I mean, Medvedev is just, apart from a test in the quarters where he had a set taken off him for the first time, we pretty much haven't spoken about him the whole tournament. I mean, he's flown under the radar, just getting it done as quickly as he's been on court, he's off court. I mean, he's been winning his matches so convincingly. So I think it's almost a guarantee he gets through to the final. I mean, he loves the hard court. He plays flat, he'll return big, but to play Novak right now, it's almost mission impossible. So he's knocked over Berrettini, 2 more to go to try and win the calendar slam and pass Roger and Rafa for the most majors to get to 21. I think it can be done.
Well, look, there's a lot riding on it, as you just said. I mean, there's so many big milestones that he could tick off. One person who unfortunately won't be able to continue adding to their trophy collection is our very own Ash Barty. Now, that hasn't panned out as all what we thought it might have. 3rd round, gone before the quarters. Really did struggle against Shelby Rogers. What do you put that performance down to?
Women's tennis. I mean, it is... If we're looking at the honour roll the last 4 or 5 years, there are that many new winners, new finalists, new semi-finalists. Players are emerging that you couldn't have predicted before the draw. It is incredible. I mean, I think it's fantastic. It certainly adds variety and spice. So it means someone like Ash, who sits at world number 1, she goes into every match facing someone who wants to take her scalp. And she had a bit of a car crash to start that match. So if her execution's off, we've said it before, it allows the door to open. So if you serve 5 double faults in your first 2 service games and you make about 15 unforced errors midway through the first set, you're in for a tough day. What was peculiar was that she reset beautifully, won the second set, dominating the third, 5-2, serving for the match, gets broken twice, goes to a tiebreaker, and 20,000 New Yorkers are on the Aperol Spritz, just getting up and rooting for their girl Shelby, as they say over in the US, and she got home. She sort of rode the wave of emotion in the end. So it's going to happen. Ash is not going to have a good day or a good tournament every time she steps out. She's still the most consistent, but she can be beaten. So she'll live to fight another day.
Now, Shelby, of course, is now out herself, so she can't claim it. But who do you think will go on to win this women's tournament?
We've got 2 teenagers left. I mean, this is phenomenal. Emma Raducanu. She was ranked 338 in the world going into Wimbledon. They actually gave her a wild card based on some potential. She has this 4th round run, the darling of Wimbledon. And then she's backed it up, making the semi-finals of the US Open. So her ranking's gone from 338 to 51.
Wow.
That's the live ranking. If she wins the whole thing, she'll shoot up towards the top 20. I mean, that is the biggest rise in the rankings that I've ever seen. And she's got a beautiful game. Her forehand up the line, technically really sound. She's just finished studying at school this year. She's been combining that. Really good people in her corner. So she's a chance possibly to beat Maria Sakkari, who beat Pliskova today. So Sakkari to her 2nd Grand Slam semi this year, made the French Open last fall. She's tough. She loves playing tennis. She could stay out there, I reckon, play for 24 hours straight. She wouldn't even get tired, Maria Sakkari. So I'm going to back her in to probably bring the 𝐊𝐴𝐚𝐥𝐤 fairy tale to an end in this tournament. And then Aryna Sabalenka, of the four, is the best equipped left. She's the number 2 seed. She's been incrementally building, 4th round into quarters, now into back-to-back semis at a major. So she's just got to keep it all in check. But her power at the back end here is going to be pretty hard to stop. But she's taking on Leylah Fernandez. What a breath of fresh air, the lefty from Canada. Anytime she's had a microphone in front of her this week, it's just a mature head on very young shoulders. And she believes that she can actually win it. She's not just thinking this is a flash in the pan. She believes in herself. So I'll go Sabalenka, but with no conviction.
Ooh, well, there we go. The expert word from a man who has given us a sharp, short delivery, much like Daniel Medvedev's game so far in this US Open. Brett, thank you once again for joining Game On.
Pleasure. Great to chat.
Yes, Novak Djokovic just 2 matches away from overtaking the all-time tally of both Federer and Nadal. Love him or hate him, it would certainly place him in discussion for the greatest tennis player of all time. Now, just before we finish up on the show, a very quick look at finances off the field with Sports Business. Well, the concept of player shirt sales paying for the transfer of a new player is typically a myth, but Cristiano Ronaldo's return to Manchester United is set to buck the trend. In just the first 12 hours after his squad number was announced by Manchester United last Saturday, Ronaldo number 7 shirts racked up £32.5 million in sales across the multiple platforms that it was available on, according to website lovethesales.com. With how the deal works with kit sponsors, United have gained 10% of the proceeds for every jersey that is sold, which stacks up to around about a quarter of the fee for Ronaldo so far. With how the instalments are structured, this means that United have already surpassed the £2.5 million they owe Juventus for this season's worth of the transfer. It's believed by season's end, jersey sales should account for the entire transfer fee. All right, well, that's it for this edition of Game On. Hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time, get out there and score a goal.